Julie, are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Is the recorder in the back
Yep,
ready?
he's-
Okay. All right, and everybody else ready? Okay. I will open the Monday, April 16, Leavenworth Board of Zoning Appeals. First of all, we do have a quorum. There's only one commissioner absent, but we do have a quorum. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the 22 January meeting. If everyone has had a chance to review them, are there any comments, concerns, changes, or a recommendation or nomination for approval of the minutes?
I move the minutes of the last meeting be approved.
Do I have a motion and a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Old business, I see that there is none. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the new business. Item 1, 2018-04, BZA 908 Spruce Street. Hold a public hearing for case number, same as above, wherein the applicant seeks a variance from the section 608 of the adopted development regulations to allow a 5-foot-high solid fence in the front yard. Staff report, please.
I will just note before we get started, we have gotten new microphones since our last meeting, and a little bit more sensitive in what they pick up or don't pick up, and so it's helpful if
So we don't have
members
to be
are
so close?
sit up. You don't have to be right up at it, but can't be leaned back. So just keep that in mind. So again, this is a request for variance at 908 Spruce Street to allow a 5-foot-high solid wood fence in the front yard. The property is zoned R16, high-density single-family residential district, and is located one lot east of the intersection of Spruce and 10th Street on the north side of Spruce. The applicant has constructed a 5-foot-high solid wooden fence on the top of an existing below-grade garage that's at the front of the property. Adjacent to Spruce Street, a fence permit was not obtained prior to the construction of the fence. Section 6.08 of the development regulation states, in regards to fences in the front yards, that open fences and hedges may be installed in all front yards on the property lines, but may not exceed 48 inches above the natural contour of the ground. And no solid fences shall be constructed or reconstructed closer to the street line than the front wall of the residential structure. And the regulations define open fences as those whose surface area is greater than 50% open. So that'd be like a chain link or a picket type fence. So the Board of Zoning Appeals does have authority in this matter. There are the 5 criteria that you need to consider when going through those. So if you have any questions, I can answer those for you, and the applicant is here as well.
Okay. Questions of the staff report? Okay, I have a couple. Just to verify that the structure is built upon a garage that faces Spruce and goes to the edge of the garage, and I would assume that the property line is the face of the garage, or at least that garage structure is within the property line of the property, so we don't have a conflict of approving a fence or whatever it ends up being called into the right-of-way, or that in itself would violate any other code in the city.
Correct. The garage is fully within the property, so the fence is not constructed in the right-of-way.
Okay.
As it were to be.
Second question is that there was a concern about safety, and I certainly understand that about the structure on top of the garage, but the steep slopes on either side and then the sidewalk that's to the east side, that doesn't seem to have played in any of the solutions of this structure. I'll call it structure rather than a fence. Will that be addressed as a part of the conversation here, or is that one of the questions I should probably ask the applicant?
I would direct that to the applicant.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions?
Sure. I think it looks terrific.
Okay. All right. Well, since the applicant, I assume, is at the podium, could you go ahead and address that, your issue about safety and why basically you built this thing so high, but you really didn't take care of any of the sides?
Yes, if we could go back to the first picture of the the plot layout, please? Because this is
Zoom
I
out a little bit.
I've owned this house since 2005. I purchased this property last year, and all of these trees that ran along the property line previously, as you can see, provided structure and you couldn't walk off the edge. But part of the reason I purchased that property was I had drainage issues into this property. And so all of these trees are now gone, which accentuated the problem of, oh my goodness, now somebody really could walk off the edge of the
That structure,
the garage
The garage,
structure.
yeah.
What you'll see in a couple of the other pictures coming up is this portion here, and this portion here are terraced with stone to be more step-like. And on the steps that actually lead up to the property, there are rails as well that have been installed that I'm not sure showed on this older picture.
no, but we saw it on one of the photographs of the construction of the, well, it's not really a deck, the bench.
The bench.
The bench that you constructed.
And this is, I've had this house as a rental property for Command and General Staff College students since 2005. And this last year was the first year I've had a family with little ones living in the property. And when they signed the initial lease, they were concerned about safety issues of their little ones being in the front yard. And so that's what also prompted me to explore something other than just a 4-foot high fence, something that could also provide safety all the way around the garage, the roof of the old garage.
And to take it a little further, I think part of your issue is that even though you say it's not a fence, the materials that you used are fence materials.
Yes, sir, they are fence materials.
And so it's certainly, in the minds of anybody who sees it, sees a fence. And I guess that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here. And I did not realize I needed because I was viewing it as a bench with a tall back, and in the drawings that we, and my builder is here with me as well, initially we had just done to the height of the back of the bench, but what we found was if you had a little one standing on
On that seat?
that seat, it didn't solve the over the edge into Spruce Street. And so as a homeowner and as a landlord, I was very concerned about the liability issues as well.
Yeah. And
that
then that
was-
leads back to my original comment about, okay, while they're within that structure, that's fine, but as soon as they dart around the corner, even if it's terraced, they still have a potential safety issue of rolling down the hill or tripping and falling down the steps, so.
And that
If it-
whole hillside, that I'm sure you're all aware of, from Spruce up to this level is very, very steep.
Yes, yeah. Okay, any questions of the applicant?
When you constructed this fence /fence, was an evaluation made of the garage to ensure that it would
Stay on the way.
allow you to have that structure on it in terms of structure of the garage
The
itself?
structural integrity?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, it is. It is a functional garage. It is concrete. It does not have any structural issues with it. The garage door has a electric garage door opener on it, and tenants have used it both for vehicles and for storage as well.
Do you know if the city had any concerns about that as well?
No, there were no issues raised.
Okay, because I know if you build a deck, you
We did
certainly
not
have to prove
add
that it'll support the
anything
number of people that the deck will hold.
to the concrete structure of the garage. It was just the perimeter. That was the addition.
Yeah. Well, I know of one instance kind of like that where they put a hot tub on there,
Oh,
and that didn't work.
no, well, no hot tub.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, if none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. So if there's anyone that either wishes to speak in favor of or against, please come up to the podium, state your name and your case.
Good evening. I'm Katie Burson. I'm the current tenant and mother of 2 handfuls. I had actually proposed the idea of something to prevent the kiddos from wandering off the edge of it. And I think it's a beautiful solution. It's functional. It adds living space. It looks great. It surely adds value to the property. And I know that it was mentioned they could wander around the corner and still wind up down the hill. It does solve the safety issues for us because we're attentive parents. It adds to the living space. We're able to hang out in there, have morning coffee, sidewalk chalk, all of that wonderful stuff. And really, they don't wander around the corners because we're there, we're watching. But meanwhile, we don't have to worry about them wandering out the front door and headed off the edge of the garage. Because it's just an extension of that front yard. So, I mean, we are very grateful to have it, and we hope that it stays.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and then open it up to the board members for discussion.
Well, one question, ma'am, do you have any of your neighbors or other adjoining landowners that wish to offer any support? Or
Not that are here with
contrary.
us this evening, but the folks who live behind also have little ones, and as I've had many families moving in, they've expressed concerns of liability issues of people. As we know, Spruce is a very busy street.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Frequently, people will come walking in across different parts from the alley because the main access to both this property and the 912 property just to the west is from the alley with we have no street parking or accessibility here. So for all 4 of these properties, the main access is through the alley, and people do walk up the alley and then down in between.
yes, ma'am. Has anyone expressed any additional questions or reservations about this?
No, everybody, as they watched it, thought it was great.
Okay, thank you.
And staff didn't receive any input from neighbors for or against this after we sent out notice.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
It was the entertainment factor for a little while.
Oh.
Putting it up, so as you know, everybody wanted to see what it was gonna look like.
Yeah. If you could stay there a second. Ms. Hurley, 2 questions. In order to come into compliance, the one issue is the height, and the second issue is that it's a completely enclosed. So if like every other board was removed, that would partially satisfy it, but still the height would be an issue?
It would still be the height, so you would be granting a variance to allow a solid fence of 5 feet high.
Well, I guess that leads into the second
Yeah.
part is, so that the recommendation or what we would be voting on would be a variance for both the height and the type of fence.
Yes, correct.
And so again, the term fence is the one that's getting you in regards to this. When this was brought to your attention, were there any options or alternatives that you thought you could live with to try and bring it into compliance?
Well,
Or would that really change the whole effect of what
my
you've got
biggest
there?
concern, again, was the safety issue with the height. So I did not see any alternative because of the way the bench had been, the height of the bench to be a sittable height on the bench. The height of providing the protectiveness, I couldn't see any
Well, generally what I ask is if you've tried to work it out at the staff and you couldn't, that's one thing. The second is, what would be the negative effect upon you and your tenants if we disapprove this? Just based on the facts that we have.
It would be,
Been
I
presented.
would be concerned about the safety and the liability issues, and also the additional cost of modifying the structure. Because this was not I did not choose an inexpensive or a fly-by-night
Sure,
solution
sure.
to the problem, and so I do have several $1,000s of
Yeah, it looks like a well-built and
and if I have to
definitely a,
modify that, obviously that's an additional cost
yeah.
that
Okay,
I would be incurring.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I would think at the age of the children that we've seen here, that not a solid fence, one of those open type of things, are capable of being squeezed out of the fenced area as opposed to a solid fence.
Right. And it still doesn't mitigate the thing about the height. So even if you tried to solve one, if you didn't
Yeah.
solve both, it's a
Yeah.
moot point. Might as well leave it alone. So then we consider that as the driver. Okay. Any other?
I think that property's pretty unique. I don't know that there's a lot of houses around town that are on that steep of a grade and with a detached garage.
It's not real common. There are a few, but you're correct. It's fairly unique.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this appears to be a reasonable solution to the problem. I mean, I noticed that place before there was ever a fence on it, and I'm always worried about people falling off stuff or liability issues.
I wonder how they cut the
Occupational
grass.
hazard, I think. But I would go so far as to say if she'd have brought this in before she ever started, I would have thought that this is
good
something that would warrant a variance.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, or are we ready to go through the questions?
I'm ready, sir.
Okay. All right. The applicant must show that his property was acquired in good faith and where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the specific piece of property at the time of the effective date of the zoning ordinance, or where by reason of exceptional topographical conditions, which you mentioned, or other extraordinary or exceptional circumstances, that the strict application of the terms of the development regulations of the city of Leavenworth, Kansas actually prohibits the use of his property in the manner similar to that of other property in the zoning district where it is located. A request for a variance may be granted upon finding of the board that all of the following conditions have been met. The board shall make a determination on each condition, and the finding shall be entered in the record. The first question, that the variance requested arises from such condition which is unique to the property in question and is not ordinarily found in the same zone or district and is not created by an action or actions of the property owner or the applicant. Commissioner Bates, would you
Agree.
like to start?
I agree.
I agree as well.
So do I.
I agree.
Okay, that's unanimous. Question 2, that the granting of the permit for the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents.
I agree.
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 And we did qualify that by asking if there was any negative comments and if any other input was received. Third question, that the strict application of the provisions of the development regulations from which the variance is requested will constitute unnecessary hardship upon the property owner represented in the application.
Agree.
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 That the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare.
Agree.
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 And lastly, that granting of the variance desired will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the development regulations.
Agree.
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 Okay, finding of agreement for all conditions. In granting a variance, the board may impose such conditions, safeguards, and restrictions upon the premises benefited by the variances as may be necessary to reduce or minimize any potentially injurious effects of such variance upon other property in the neighborhood, and to carry out the general purpose and intent of these development regulations. With that said, are there any conditions or any other comments that anyone would like to add to the pending approval of this variance request? Any other safety measures?
I should have asked earlier, is this thing bolted to the structure? Yes. So heavy wind's not going to blow it into the street? Okay, good.
So then, I assume none.
Yeah, none.
Okay. All right then, if there are none, we may approve or deny the request for a variance from 6.08 of the development regulations to allow a 5-foot-high solid fence in the front yard of the property located at 908 Spruce Street. So in addition to that, we need to add not only the height, but the type of fence that was installed,
Right.
and we need a motion for that, correct? Would anyone like to either make a motion and change the wording, or just in their own
I'll
words?
move to approve it,
Move to approve.
both, the size of the fence, height of the fence,
And
and
the
the
time.
solid structure.
Okay, we have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Recommendation to approve the variance.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. On to the second item on the agenda. 2018-05 BZA 1850 Edgewood Drive. Hold a public hearing wherein the applicant, Bruce Wiley, is requesting a variance from section 4.03 of the adopted development regulations to allow construction of a single-family house on a lot with less than the required minimum lot width. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is a approximately 14-acre lot zoned R19 medium-density single-family residential district located in the Shannon Woods subdivision. This property was included in the original preliminary plat for the subdivision and was intended to include approximately 38 additional residential lots. The preliminary plat was approved in 2002. A final plat was never recorded for this section of the property, and preliminary plats become null and void after a year from their approval date if no final plat has been recorded for that. The owner has indicated that he has no plans to develop any more lots as were shown on the preliminary plat at this time. Section 4.03 of the regulations requires a minimum lot width of 75 feet for properties zoned R19. Lot width is defined as the distance between the side lot lines measured along the front setback line as established by the ordinance. Where the front setback line is curvilinear, lot width shall be measured along the tangent to this curve. And front setback is defined as a line fixed parallel to the lot line beyond which a building cannot extend under the terms of the development regulations. It is equivalent to the front yard, to the yard requirement. So generally, staff has interpreted lot width to mean lot frontage or the distance along street or distance along a right-of-way. So due to the irregular nature of the shape and size of this lot, it has approximately only 34 feet of lot frontage, and that was measured along this the small portion of Edgewood Drive to the east of the circle that extends just a slight way into the property line. The Development Review Committee did review this application on March 22nd. There were a couple of other issues identified, including access to sewer and the property being identified as a geological hazard area. Those items are such things that would be addressed at the time of building permit and are not really the Board of Zoning Appeals doesn't really need to be concerned with those. Those are just more for note. Notice was sent to property owners within 200 feet of the property. Staff had received inquiries from 4 property owners regarding the use of the permit, with no specific objection or support expressed. And we have received a call from 1 property owner indicating opposition to the application. I believe that property owner is here tonight. So this would fall under the authority of the Board of Zoning Appeals. If you have any questions, I can answer those for you, and the property owner is here as well.
Any questions on the staff report? I have one. This is the actual, well, not legal description, but the lot in question, not,
Correct. The property owner
subdivision.
provided that to us this afternoon, and so the small rectangle there is representative of where they would anticipate a home being constructed.
and based on this, I'm assuming because it matches the 34 feet, that they would have to come into the street at a right angle and not come directly off the end of the current paved street.
Regulations don't really address that specifically, but that would be the intent of staff when they would come in for a building permit, would be to request that it come off
Off the
of that,
side there.
of the side there instead of the end, that dead end.
When you went through the initial review, did the Public Works make any specific statements about access to Edgewood Drive?
They did not.
Or a concern that, basically a driveway wouldn't come off a dead-end street, so that if somebody came through that roundabout and headed straight thinking, it was late and they didn't know what was going on, that they would end up
There was
in the front of the house?
There was some concern, I think, expressed, but again, there's no specific prohibition to that in the regulations, so it's something that would be requested of the property owner when they would come in for a permit. But since that's not specifically addressed in any of our regulations or ordinances, it's not something that we can really specifically prohibit.
Yeah, I don't know of any instance in the city where that has been allowed, so that's why I asked, did the Public Works specifically say, you cannot do this?
Yeah, there was some concern expressed.
Okay. I guess we're also to assume that unless provided an actual plot plan where it shows the driveway to the house, we're just assuming that that's the only frontage that they have and that's the only likely solution. Because I can think of other solutions. It would basically put a cul-de-sac at the end of that dead-end road, and then they can have whatever they want. Who would pay for that, I don't know, but I would think that the Public Works, that if it's a dedicated street, that would be something that would be beneficial not only to the city, but to the property owner. But if that didn't come up, then it didn't come up. That would have made it easy.
Yeah, and any construction of additional right-of-way would basically be
Have to be
on the
acquired,
developer
dedicated to the.
or property owner, as developers are responsible for constructing any roads.
Is all the roads done by benefit district now? Are there none that the city would, like, would the city have the means to construct a cul-de-sac at the end of that dead-end street? It's never come up before.
It has not come up. I would hesitate to venture a guess as to how
Because
that
like I
would
say,
be
that would be
financed.
perfect, that'd be a perfect solution. There would be no issue, it would make sense to end that. And when you approve a phase one and counting on phase two to continue it and phase two doesn't happen, these are the kind of things that then cause issues for this other piece of property that didn't get platted. And I believe I was on the planning commission that approved that first phase, so I share in that. Okay, and any other questions or comments by anyone else?
Are there safety issues involved with the frontage issue, or is it just aesthetics?
The intent of that would really be to just keep some continuity in sizes of lots. And so really with this lot, just really due to the irregular nature of it and just the size and configuration, obviously this lot is much larger than other lots in the subdivision.
But not a whole lot of buildable area.
Not a whole lot of buildable area, and it's just not a regular configuration. And so that led to kind of us being here with no way to really accurately gauge what would be a lot frontage or lot width, since there's no front or back or sides.
That's why that cul-de-sac would just make so much sense to everybody and work. But I know, somebody's got to pay for it.
In the summary, ma'am, you mentioned that the hillside is a geological hazard area. Is that, can you talk to the composition of the soil or rock or what exactly what specific hazard the hillside provides?
In talking with our city engineer,
Is it
the
because
city
of
does have
slippage
some
along
soil
the road?
reports, and it's my understanding that it's more the eastern portion of the lot that would be the hazard area. My basic understanding is that there are kind of grades of what the hazard would be, and the area where they're proposing to build the property on the westernmost portion of the lot is not a spot that would be considered a hazard or prohibitive to constructing a residence.
Okay, thank you.
So right now, it's just an educated guess that's not based on any soil borings or any facts?
We do have maps, I believe from the
The geological
USGS,
survey,
that are in our GIS system, and so we can tell roughly where
Yeah,
those are at.
It'll show what the
Yes.
what the makeup is, but it's not like the road, that Ohio Hill and all, that you actually have evidence of slippage and
Right, and
a little bit
so
uphill from that.
I would guess that,
it's
soil
in that
borings
same
would
drainage
possibly be
pattern.
needed, at the time of construction, if there was a question about that.
But even if it was, that really isn't an issue for the
That wouldn't be
BZA.
for the
It's just a
BZA to
concern for
consider.
the owner or the proposed owner and builder
Right.
of the structure on there. Just to beware. Okay.
In your presentation, you said that the regulations and the ordinances, something to the effect that the regulations and the ordinances are generally interpreted as 70 feet? Or is there a hard and fast regulation or ordinance about 70 feet?
It's required to be 75 feet. When I said it, the general interpretation, that's staff's interpretation as to determining what that lot width would mean. In a typical residential lot, it's very clear where the front yard and side yards and backyards are. So staff has to really, interpret those regulations and make some judgment calls when you're dealing with an irregular shaped lot. So that was what I was referring to, not the 75 feet. The 75 feet is the hard and fast requirement.
And this lot is going to be 4 acres,
It's 14.
14
Yes.
acres?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a cul-de-sac would really be the answer to the whole thing.
So ma'am, you mentioned that at least 4 landowners or property owners had expressed interest, but not necessarily opposition
Mainly
or
just
support.
questions as to what was being proposed. I think the general question was in regards to whether or not this was being subdivided for more lots, just more curiosity as to what was being proposed.
Okay, and the one property owner who appeared or sounded or might have opposed this, did this property owner submit a statement?
They did not submit anything written, but I believe they are here tonight, and I understand that it's the property owner directly to the south of the lot in question.
So, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Before this one,
Right.
when you were
something here. Okay. Is there any place in Love North that you can think of where there is just an entrance to a lot where someone has built a home? I've seen, I don't think it's in Love North, but I'm seeing in my mind a brick entranceway where it says private drive, and you drive into this area, and back in here's, it might be Johnson County somewhere.
I can't think of one off the top of my head that's in town
Okay,
like that. I kind of know what you're talking about, but I can't picture one that would be in town.
okay.
I know of 2 lots that had to have access, and they got an easement from the neighbor that allowed them basically to use their side yard as an access to the property back behind him. Not quite like this, but still an unusual circumstance of how do you get to a landlocked piece of property that's not accessible from the normal street that's in front of it because of the hill that goes up to it.
But they probably had an existing building already there in that case, in this
No,
case?
they couldn't get the, well, I'm assuming that.
Because if all they did was get an
I
easement to
don't
get back
know.
there, they would not have
Because they built a
frontage.
garage to it, but how could you get to the garage if you had to park on the street? So I'm assuming it all happened at the same time. But I don't know for sure. I just know it's an unusual circumstance where in order to get access, they had to get an easement from their neighbor to cross their property to get to it. It's the only one I've seen that's even come close to this crazy little glitch. Again, there you go, phase 2. Okay. Any other comments?
I'll wait.
Okay. Well, if no other,
Was the
No
owner
other-
going to speak, or you're getting to that?
yeah, usually what I do is open the public hearing and then the occupant can come up and say, for or against. So I think that's what I'll do in this case. The other one kind of rushed up and it's a little out of sequence, but I will go ahead and open the public hearing, and anyone who wants to speak in favor of or against, please come to the podium. And I guess if the owner would like to come first, then the commissioners can ask the questions.
Hello there. My name is Bruce Wiley. I'm the owner of the property. Originally, this piece of property, there was 100 acres, and it was in an estate, my dad's estate, and it was divided, and it ended up that the three of his kids decided how to divide up the property. In the process, my brother decided to go into the development business, and he built phase 1, which is a very attractive community. In the interim, my brother, myself, and my sister owned the remaining acreage, and as time went along, we decided we divide up the property. My brother, time moves on, and he decided not to continue on to the east of the subdivision. So anyway, this particular piece of property is the piece of property that I ended up with. I've had it on the market probably for 4 years, and I looked for developers, couldn't find any. The gentleman that has expressed interest in this property, his plans are to build a quite nice home in keeping with the rest of the subdivision, swimming pool, big home. And I didn't realize upon discussing selling it to him that we had this issue. I didn't even think about it, so it came up. So at this juncture, there is sewer on the property, but I'm not a developer. And again, time marches on. I'm 67. 66. I have no plans on, trying to be a developer. And so, in essence, the only practical thing is try to sell to somebody. I thought, well, maybe I'd find somebody that would want to buy the property, would want to divide it twice or something of that sort, and have, sell half of it or whatever, but it never came to fruition. So finally, I've got a gentleman that is interested in the property. He's going to make it an attractive home and swimming pool and the whole 9 yards. So I'm just sort of at a standstill on it. So that's the reason I'm up here before the board. So if I could answer any questions, I'd be more than happy to. I did want to point out that as far as safety is concerned, you'll notice that roundabout there, you can't drive probably over 20 miles an hour, even around that area. And of course, I would think that if you deemed that we could possibly move on with the situation, there could even be some signage, no outlet or anything of that sort. I wouldn't anticipate that because it's not like somebody's going to be coming in and driving 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. It's pretty apparent that the street is coming to an end, and if there was a driveway there, it would just sort of, blend in. I guess I don't have much to add beyond that. I could try to answer any questions.
Any questions? The intent, I believe, is to sell all of tract number 2 to a single owner and to abandon all plans to subdivide it?
That's right, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so there would only be one house
One
on
house.
that entire
Right.
lot? Okay. And then just a matter of, this work preliminary plan doesn't match what actually exists. It's close, but it doesn't match it.
Yeah.
So it's a
and-
little hard to judge the property line here since these all
Yeah, and
are a little squirrely, but that's all that I needed was that there will only be one house on that entire large tract.
Sure. And I would anticipate that probably some of the homeowners around where this gentleman would like to build his house would be probably happy because it would be a less busy place.
Yeah.
And quiet.
Was there any thought or consideration to trying to build a cul-de-sac or add an end to that street so that basically you wouldn't have had this issue with the driveway and the that big pile of rocks and those busted up reflector signs at the end of the street?
I want to tell you about the big pile of rocks. Big pile of rocks was left City 11 when they built 20th Street. They dumped them in a hole in my subdivision. I had to dig all those rocks up, clean out the hole, cost me lots of money. We got $90,000 for a piece of ground from City 11 for 20th Street. I probably spent $45,000 cleaning out the mess. The rocks are sitting there, we hauled about half of them away. I'd be glad for you guys to come and get them.
Well, I was just worrying about the potential buyer, and I wouldn't have that in my front yard.
We had mentioned it, and basically, I had anticipated this, that with that pile of rocks, I would offer to haul them away, and I had mentioned to him that some people like rocks for landscaping, and they
Try to
fully
incorporate
intend to use, actually, the acreage that's on the other side of the draw there, he's got grandkids, and he's got family that lives up on Fairmount Road, and they're all going to come to Grandpa's and play around on the back acreage. And so as far as, I'm just sort of leaving that up to him, what would happen with the rocks. If I needed to haul them away, so be it. I've talked to Mike Fredericks, and he said that he might find a home for them if need be. So I'm just sort of leaving it up to the buyer, what he would want to do with the rocks. But,
Well, I guess part of my concern is that that's kind of helps people to note that that's a dead end.
sure.
When you went before this review committee, the city's review committee, did the subject come up about what's to be done? What is the city's intent to do with the end of that current road? And
There was no.
Or to do nothing
we
at
talked to
all,
Mike,
and-
there was nothing to do. I had even offered to say, oh, if this would help, to donate some right-of-way or something of that sort. If you, the coldest, this piece of property is, I'm selling it at a pretty low figure for 14 acres in the city of Leavenworth. And constructing a cul-de-sac would be, I mean, it would be, it would be that kind of money. I don't know, I'm not sure what a cul-de-sac would be, but I'm selling this property at a pretty, really reasonable figure because I have found no buyers, and so I would like to liquidate it.
Yeah, well, I can see where, if there was a cul-de-sac, if it was cleaned up, it would be, I think, a lot more attractive. Yes, thank you. A lot more attractive to a potential buyer. You got to really have a vision when you go there and you look at it, and it's like, wow. Like I say, just that one little extra.
I can picture this, that
Road at
a
the
nice
end, a
driveway
cul-de-sac.
going up at an angle or whatever, swimming pool, nice big laid out house. And if need be, a sign that says no outlet,
Yeah.
and nobody's gonna be
Well,
driving crazy.
sometimes the driveway up to the house is part of the experience, and
Sure.
so I just ask.
Sure. I've tried to look at every option in the time period of anticipation of this meeting, but this is the only solution I could come up
And the
with.
city does own that street, right? They built the street, or, well, they may not have built it,
Streets are
but they.
typically put in by developers
Right,
when they develop a
but then
subdivision.
it's turned over to the city. The
dedicated
city
to the
owns it,
city, yes.
maintains it, and is responsible if there are accidents or anything like that.
Right.
Including fixing those reflectors on the end.
Just building a cul-de-sac there doesn't solve the problem, because they'd have to plat it, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they have, because they still have to have
they'd have
75 feet of frontage,
Um,
according to your rules.
If there was a cul-de-sac, a bulb at the end of that stub, we could measure along the radius of that cul-de-sac
It would serve
bulb
the same
and
purpose as that.
probably get to 75 feet. If there were a
'Cause it's an
cul-de-sac
arc.
in there, yeah, we would measure that.
I would say this, that the actual houses, that the little stub street there isn't really any houses that even face that. It's sort of their side yard or their
Yes,
backyard,
Yeah.
and there's no reason for anybody truly to go into there other than if somebody lives in a house in there, or the developer put a street in, but
yeah.
that would be the only reason. And again, that roundabout there, if you've ever driven out there, it really slows things down substantially.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, my name is Lonnie Meadows. I live at 1816 Edgewood Court, which is the property right here. And then this is my property. What's misleading on this and what my issue is, I have two deeds. I have the original Lot 40, which is 3.41 acres, the dotted area. Then Willard Wiley came to me, along with Bruce and the family, and said, hey, would you be interested in purchasing some land? I said, yes, I would. I purchased this 10 acres in like 2015. At the time, I said, well, my biggest concern, because they said, you could build that, and you'd have that land, and you'd be able to put some houses in there, and it'd be a long-term investment. And so we talked about, okay, you may have to purchase one lot to get access. Well, if this goes through, that's 10 acres, that's landlocked. I have no right-of-way to get there. I don't have an easement. So I kind of got 14 acres, and I paid a lot more per acre than what the current acres are selling for. So that's my concern. And if somebody would have come to me and offered me some kind of an option to get access to that 10 acres. And again, I'm not going to develop it next week. You know, I was kind of looking for the kids, the grandkids, you know, 20 years from now, 10 years from now. Somebody may build a couple of houses back there and further develop it. So, you know, Willard said, well, you know, you can cut through lot 40 and you can put a road through here. And I've been talking to the city and the county folks, and they've been very helpful. And I think I talked with Mr. Chris Culberson. He said, no, you can't do that because you don't have the frontage to put a second driveway through there. So I cannot get to those 10 acres through lot 40. So that's my concern.
Was he speaking of a private drive or like a city street?
To me, a private drive.
It's like Pine Ridge is a private drive.
Yes, sir. Something like that, just so I could get access to it. So number one, if I want to work back there, I could, you know, come off of this dead end and somehow get back there. What I will say is I have talked to a couple of my neighbors, my next door neighbor, the Blaines. Me personally, I think what Bruce said, a lot of the people here are very happy with the fact that there's going to be one house built there. What was concerning was the initial piece of paper that was provided, showed a house with an RV parking area, and it was huge. It was like the size of the middle school on the plot. So people were concerned about that, saying, well, you know, what is my concern? There's no plan, so we're trying to approve something that there's no plan for where the house is going to be, where the frontage would be. And again, you know, Carl's here to talk his piece, but I know the people next to me would love to be able to have access. They've purchased 2 lots. They would love to be able to access, because the only way he can really get into his yard is from below because of the steep hill. So again, I think I like the idea of having a single-family house in there, but I've got the issue of having this landlocked 10 acres that, you know, the value of those 10 acres, I assume, would plummet the day that I can't get to them. So I did bring in, you know, I went to the deed office today. I do have the 2 deeds. I've provided those, so you've got copies of that. You do have a copy of the plat there that shows how those 2 acres lay out. And so it really gets down to, you know, and you said this was kind of a 3-phase deal, and phase 2 was supposed to go through. You know, and I did want to buy that property, but I also said, well, you know, how will I ever get access to it? Oh, you know, you'll be able to buy a lot and you'll be able to get access to it. So that's my biggest concern, because I think it puts me in a pretty bad position. If somebody would have come to us and I think talked about, you know, how could we get access to it? Could I purchase more land and kind of come off of that cul-de-sac and get back to that property, or whatever happens? You know, I'd have to figure out if that would be doable. So I guess I don't have an issue with putting a single-family house in there. I guess my issue that from some of my other neighbors is you're being asked to approve this waiver, but you don't really have a plan for what's going in there. You know, you don't really know what's going there, so I think it's a little premature to approve the plan. But yeah, my primary concern is the easement and that landlocked 10 acres. So I thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Well, we have the ability to put conditions on anything we would approve. So, I mean, if we were to approve a variance, we could require that they can only have a single family home on there. Is that correct, Julie?
Because that's all it's zoned for, correctly?
Yeah, it's just zoned for single family.
So unless the zoning is changed,
Yeah, they can only put one
then it would only be
house
one.
on there, so,
So we don't even have to do that then?
no. It
But-
would need to be, the 14-acre lot in question would need to be subdivided further if anybody wanted to put additional homes in that area.
And the true value of that extra land you bought really relies on somebody doing something in the future to get access to it through land that you don't own.
Right, so right now, I can't get to it. I'd have to tear my current house down, would be the only way we could get access.
So if they solve the problem by building this cul-de-sac or putting the cul-de-sac in, that doesn't, you still got your problem.
Yes, sir, unless I purchase property to link the cul-de-sac to that land.
The only thing that would work in conjunction with his future plans would be to implement a portion of the proposed Phase 2, which would include that road
Street.
that would come down.
Yeah,
And then everything on
and
the north
road
side
goes
could
in,
be
yeah,
the one guy in the one house, and then the road and the lots to the south of that to your property.
Because that is the road where, this is my property line, as I understand it, right, so that's the road we're on.
Yeah.
So when we kind of discussed this with Willard, when I was buying this, he said, oh, yeah, worst case, you might have to buy this lot or this lot. So that's what that was
Yeah.
my bigger concern.
And when the current owner was looking at potential other developers to purchase that property, were you aware of that? And at that time would have been a good time for you to jump in and say, hey, if this could be a joint effort, I want to develop this other stuff, I need a road access to it. You can
Yeah,
have
I
everything to the
did,
north,
yes,
I'll take
sir.
everything to the south?
I did not do that, no. I knew the land was for sale, but I thought it was for sale to do that.
Yeah.
And if that would have happened, I'd have been happy. And I'm not saying that that I'm not happy that it's
would have
going to
been
be a
happier.
single family, but
you would have been
I'm
happy.
landlocked, that's my biggest concern.
And if they build that house where they say they are, that could still be done. The proposed plat could be redrawn to still
but the-
allow that road to come down and into that other 10 acres.
Yes, sir. But the original, my wife went down and got a copy of the original thing, and that was way down here and covered it up.
Yep.
Can I get up for a second and show you on the map what
Yeah, you bet.
when Claudia bought the piece of ground, he knew that the street would not probably go into his property. Right? But this was an artist drawing from the engineer.
Sir,
Right.
excuse me, sir?
I'm Willie Wally.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Okay, so what I talked about with Claudia was the road would come around here, and lots would back up to this, and we might have to buy a lot here if the streets went on through.
Uh-huh.
And then the rest of this would be kind of how it went, except for this street would come around like this.
Sure.
I met with a guy that's gonna build a house, and I recommended to him that he puts his house right here, okay?
Right.
Which would
Still allow some
this
of
to be
that.
subdivided at some point, if it happens. Problem is, in Leavenworth is, we got problems with people moving to Lansing.
It's not a good market right now.
And so, this has been 12, 13 years that I've been dealing with this, and it's broken. I thought if I had money in my pocket, this would not be happening like this. But Leavenworth is not selling houses, not selling lots. And so I brought a nice subdivision in town, Leavenworth's not supporting. So, that's part of the problem. But in Plotty's point here, and I don't, because it belongs to my brother, and I gotta be a little cautious, but I got neighbors and I got a brother. So, but a cul-de-sac may be the mistake. Maybe what it probably could be is maybe an extension of the street of how it would be through here, and allow him to have the 75 or 100 foot, whatever he had for frontage, and make him build his house here or on this other side of where the street would be. When we put 20th Street through, I grew up with that too. My dad, we moved to 20th and Spruce when I was born, 55. And 20th Street was gonna go through 35 years. My dad did see it, but didn't know what he was seeing. So 20th Street was supposed to go through. But when you develop a piece of ground, and you couldn't develop that piece of ground up on the Compton, you couldn't develop that because 20th Street was gone. So what I would tell you is if you, and you know, and this, again, I got a brother and I got neighbors, and I built nice houses for them. My suggestion would be is make sure that this easement stays in place. Make sure that that if he has to have an extension of the street, have an extension of the street to get his house in. House needs to be over here or over here. Then, or he can put it over here. However long he does with the street is how far that house is going to be set back. Now, they talked about hillside slipping. Not on our place. Up on top, they're on top of the hill. They have that. They're up on top. Not down in here.
Yeah, that's why I asked if it was just
Yeah, it's not,
a gut feel or if there was actual evidence.
it didn't happen, doesn't happen. So anyway, I mean, that is my suggestion. And I think for Body's purposes and for the guy that's gonna buy it, smart thing for him to do is not take the thought that this street's gonna go through later. Because he's a 66 or 7-year-old man too. We all can die tomorrow. So he's got to be able to have a piece of property that he can sell too. So that's just my suggestion, and I have pictures of it this way, but this is what the original
Sure,
plan was. So.
that's just one potential
Yeah,
option that could
yeah,
work.
yeah. Okay, sorry.
Right.
Didn't think about it, we won't be fighting.
Yes, sir?
And again, I've got brothers but no neighbors, so. In talking with the buyer, I don't think that he has any vision of anything other than a solid 14-acre estate. No plans on developing and looking beyond 30 years from now.
Is he here tonight? Or?
He is not.
Okay.
His intention was to be here, but he had trouble a couple of weeks ago when we met of walking, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. He thinks he's had a stroke, and that they don't know what the deal is with him. So he, rather than, he just decided I just told him, you stay at home, take care of your health, and I'll take the lead on this and speak for you. But that's his intention, and he's due to go to a specialist on Friday. But he's at this juncture, he had a little bit of trouble verbalizing when I talked to him on the phone. So
Okay.
I just said, I'll do this. So.
Sure. One thing that the request for the variance is just for the driveway. So any of these other things that we've been talking about, it's a concern of the neighbor, and I think that if the three of you can get together and talk about the future, and if you place your house where you say it is, then it leaves it open. Doesn't force anybody to do anything, but at least it will kind of ease some of the concerns, or the only concern so far that we've heard here, that
He would probably need to, if the buyer buys the property, he might be able to buy an easement or whatever from him.
exactly.
And,
Just
and
if
I
you
don't
can
wanna
get them
run
together to
run
talk.
it for him, for the buyer, because I can say it that his intention isn't to develop it. So then it could, it's a matter of negotiation and possibly.
Yeah, between them,
Between them.
the future, right.
That's right.
Yeah, the good thing is one house for now, and that's all that we as a board are gonna be dealing with. But now that you know who the players are, it would be good for you to get involved.
Yes, I do have a question then. So what are my legal, because again, I'm not a lawyer for the zoning commission, so how do I request, so when I talked to the GIS guy, he said to basically request an easement through Bruce's property now. So that's what he recommended I do. So I don't know how is there a legal thing that I have to do to request easement to that property?
If you need an easement through a piece of property, you would deal with the current property owner, or future property owner in this case. But yeah, that wouldn't be anything that we could help you with, because it's a what if, and you did buy the property in its existing state and nothing has changed. So it's a matter of starting talks with the people that own the property.
So I don't have any
The city can tell you what the minimum requirements are, and then you can go from there.
Okay.
And I believe that's true, is it not?
And I will say this, that the gentleman that is buying the property is well-versed and reasonable individual, so I think that the gentleman here could approach him. I'm not sure what the answer would be, but I think possibly something to look at.
Okay.
I'm not speaking for the buyer.
I'll be glad.
Yes, sir.
Yes, gentlemen, ladies. Carl Fisher, one of Wooler's neighbors, but not his brother. I'm right here. I just wanted to make a point that while Claudia has a very specific concern about this property, the Blaines, who are our eastern neighbors, and the McCowans right there to our north, also have, we're going to look at this thing. And I know there's no plan, and I know we're probably not at the point where we're even really talking about it, but one of the little artist drawings we looked at insinuated there was a large RV storage or parking area, maybe a garage, I don't really know, behind the house. Well, in our neighborhood, that kind of setup wouldn't be allowed. And I know this is adjoining the neighborhood, and it's no longer part of the neighborhood, but
Well,
I guess, I'm
Actually,
sorry.
Ms. Harley, it is part of the subdivision, right? Even though it wasn't platted.
I read it
It
two
is a
ways
part
in
of,
the paperwork.
the tract 2 is a part of the subdivision and therefore should be held accountable to all of the current,
It's not a
Regulations.
part of the final plat of
Yeah, it was,
Shannon Woods, so I'm not sure if they have an HOA or how that's set up, if that includes this, but it was not platted. There was no final plat filed for this property to make it a part of Shannon Woods.
I guess, sir, the point is really simply that there are other residents, other neighbors that have other concerns. It's not simply the access to the right-of-way to those 10 acres, but some of the rest of us would also enjoy that same ability to talk to Bruce and whoever the purchaser of that property is. We're ecstatic, I think, as a neighborhood, that it'd be one house going in there. But one house with, you know, a work shed in the back that looks like a Butler building would probably be I don't mean to come off like a jerk about it, but this is I think somebody called it
that's why we have a
an
public
attractive
hearing.
neighborhood, so. Yes, sir. Thank
However,
you.
I'll go back to it's owned single-family home.
Yes.
Correct? When a single-family home, you can't have an RV parked.
An RV can be parked in the rear yard
In the
of,
rear yard.
of a home. And it can be,
One.
an RV can parked
One
in the
single
side
one.
or the front yard, between April and October, the commission has decided. And in the wintertime, it has to be in the rear yard on a paved surface.
Okay, so he has a larger area to work with, but it's basically the same rules that apply to any of the other lots that are in the
Yes.
subdivision.
Yes,
So there is some protection.
yes.
It's just, it may seem that it's got its own rules, but it really doesn't.
Right, and if they have an HOA that has, you know, additional or more stringent regulations, this lot would not be subject to those since it's not part of the Shannon Woods subdivision.
Right, but the zoning would.
The
They-
zoning
They would
would
have to
would
comply
apply.
with all of the
Yes.
current zoning that's standard across the city. Yeah, okay. All right.
So right now, we can't have like that fence, that's not allowed in this neighborhood, but he could put that kind of a fence up, because the HOA doesn't apply to that.
Oh, it's like the previous issue about the
Yes, sir. So we have to
4
have
foot,
that
5 foot
black
property
metal
line and all of
fence,
that?
The most expensive kind of fence you can buy, that's what's required, you put a fence in there. So, no wood fences, so I know Carl, and I know that's the Blaine's concern is the HOA would not apply to whatever is built there.
Not to the,
That's not my concern, because I can't see
not
it,
to the
but that's
14
their
acres.
concern.
Right. Right, Ms. Hurley? The HOA does not apply to
Correct,
that
because that
particular
lot is
tract
not
of
part
property.
of their subdivision.
Right. As a condition of the variance, could that be added to the recommendation?
I
if
don't know
approved?
that legally you can require a property owner to join an HOA. That would be, we would need to consult with the city attorney, but I'm not sure that that can be a requirement.
Yeah, I don't think,
I think the seller could make the purchase of it contingent on adhering to,
the current rules, but
The
not
rules.
not force him to be a member of the homeowners association.
Yes.
I'll just do one more time. The guy's gonna build about a $700,000 house. And the way it sounded to me, and I met with him one time, and I saw the plans, it's quite a house, but, and I'm not sure what the RV thing is, I think maybe he was planning on having a garage that he could put an RV in, is what I think. I think that's what it is. And he's gonna put a pool in, so, but the drawing that you have up there with the little, where the house is at, is my drawing.
This one? Okay,
Right. That's really kind of scale what the house is at.
okay.
And so, and again, I recommended to him to put the house where I got it on that plat there. So, which opens up the road in front of him later on. And again, I told him, you know, if you ever decide to develop this, or if somebody else comes in and buys it, that leaves that road in front of you available. So, but,
Ms. Hurley, can we make that a condition? That it be placed on the site not to conflict with a potential road, the extension of that road? I know, it's not an easy question.
I'm not sure, honestly, and that I would feel like we need to run that by.
I don't think we can, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can. And I would just ask that anybody speaking come to the podium so that we can record comments for the minutes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure that that could be
Go ahead.
required. But again, where the applicant has shown a potential location for a house is away from where the right-of-way was shown in
currently
the
it is.
preliminary plat,
But that
so,
doesn't guarantee that that's what he's
Right.
gonna go with. If we grant the variance and don't state that,
right.
so I guess we could say, in accordance with the drawing that was provided.
Yes, yes,
So
since that was
So then if the
provided,
truth changes, you would have an opportunity to revisit.
correct.
Okay. Sir, go ahead.
I would just sort of go along with that point. Basically, where he's putting his house, 20 years down the line, another body can take a look at this if they decide that they want to do further development and make their decision based on the merits at that time. But the area would be open, the house wouldn't be sitting in the middle of where the right-of-way would be, and in other words, it would just be down the road. Maybe some of us will be around, but maybe not. So,
Yeah, we're
if that would ever come to pass.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm gonna get it one more time, too. All right. You know, what, I'll get up. If the requirement's 75 feet, maybe what you do is you extend the street out 75 feet. And just like it ends now, it ends, and then he takes his driveway off of the north side. And then that way, the easement, or where the street would go on, would be continue on from the end of what he put on the 75 feet. Not a cul-de-sac, because cul-de-sac makes it so you can't get into Pilates, because it's too far back.
Right, it could be modified later, but your
Yeah.
solution is
I think
is a cleaner solution.
And I don't know what 75 feet of street would cost. It's probably, $30,000, $40,000. But that may be,
And if you would
that would make it so the property could be developed later on, and he could have his house, and he could have a driveway to meet the standards.
and if you did that, we wouldn't need a variance.
Right, and staff did suggest that to the potential buyer for this property when he came in to meet. And the concern at that time was cost, since that would need to be built to city street standards. Again, I'm not sure of the cost per linear foot of street, but that the cost, I think, was the concern at that time, and so he opted to pursue the variance request instead.
And there is already 34 feet there. So maybe all he needs is the other 41 feet
Whatever the bare minimum would be
Yeah.
to meet
to put his driveway in.
the current. And if I'm building a $750,000 house, I'd like a nice driveway come into my house and not something,
Well, it could come off the end, it could come off the side of the street instead of the end of the street.
right.
Okay.
If, sorry, back up to the podium.
I would say this, that we're sort of planning, if a gentleman wants to buy the 14 acres, we're sort of planning for him the future of a street, when in fact he might not want a street. He might see this as one acreage, has no intention of doing it. The land still will be vacant where he's at. The gentleman that's buying the property would just sort of like a driveway off to the side and at an angle or whatever. And then if the area would still be wide open, and it could be revisited at many years down the line or next year, but most likely it would be many years down the line. We're just sort of saying, okay, you're buying a piece of property, but you know, you need to plan for a development in it, and and that isn't his intention. So that's sort of where things are at that juncture. So.
Sure.
Would you like to table your request, sir? Would you like us to table your request so that you can spend some more time discussing these issues or do you want us to vote on it tonight?
I would like a vote on it if possible, because the gentleman, you know, any further delay, you know, the only consideration that he's got beyond this is his health. And if things check out, he's ready to build, submit plans. And, you know, I would think that with the stipulation that the house be located, let's just say where the drawing is, that it not block any possible access to a street at a later date, but it might not ever happen. And it's most likely won't happen. So.
Okay. All right.
Wait a second. Current owner is asking for the easement.
Variance.
Correct.
Just, the current owner is the one that's asking for the easement, so.
Well, for the variance, not
For
for
the
an easement,
variance, I'm
yeah.
sorry. So, whatever Mr. Wiley says should be our decision, unless he wants to delay it.
Include.
It's not me.
No.
Unless he wants to delay it until he can talk to his buyer. But as he just stated, based on what he is requesting for on the variance and how we vote tonight is a done deal as far as we're concerned. So
True.
all these alternatives about easements and roads, extension, additional money to satisfy his buyer, we have to go with
Right.
his desires.
Yeah, I think the intent was to give him an option, and if he chose not to, then yes, we will act on whatever's been presented to
Correct.
us.
Now, the gentleman was raising his hand.
And I think what we were trying to do is alleviate
Offer-
any concerns
yeah.
of the neighbors that
Yeah.
have been expressed.
I live close in.
Switch back over.
My name is Brothers, but I don't have any kids. I wanted to be clear on something. I have no objection to the single-family home. That sounds great on what we've heard. But if you grant an easement, everything else that's been said about a $750,000 home and all, that's,
Immaterial.
It's immaterial.
nobody's bound by that.
That's true.
That's imagination and wishful thinking and future plans that could fall apart. The gentleman that buys it after an easement is granted could go in there and build a minimum thing required by the statutes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct.
That was my question.
Hey, would you please confirm that? sir?
That's correct.
Okay. So you have it from city staff, too? Okay. Anyone else?
That's why I asked if you'd want to table it, because if you came back and said and the buyer could say specifically, this is exactly what I'm going to build, then we could, if we were to grant the variance, we could make that contingent upon him doing just that, and only that. And we don't have that information. We don't have enough information. At least I don't feel like I do. I apologize for
Right.
speaking for everybody.
I would table it based upon the fact that, I can talk to him as far as location of the house. Basically, he was in agreement on where that drawing was, where the house would be located. Beyond that, he's has a house plan that he's thinking about how it would look. But, you know, I'm not sure of the relevance to the situation. Where the house is placed is pretty much everything. And again, he has no intention of developing the property and putting a road in there and all that. He's buying it for quiet. So he doesn't want, he's not looking for a road in there. It would be his property, and, you know, that's just sort of the end. It's his big backyard. He's got a 10-acre backyard over across the draw over there.
But to answer your question, the issue is we have to find these 5 or 6, I guess five requirements in the affirmative.
Sure.
And if we find one of them in the negative, such as will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents, then it fails. So if we don't have enough information, that's the answer.
As an owner, you know, myself, and I'm not, but I'm under no obligation to provide an easement for other property owners.
I agree with that.
And we cannot make you do that either.
And so, in essence, the buyer, if he chooses, if he would say, you know, I want to put my house over here, I'm going to put up a $700,000 house, it's going to look beautiful. I have no intentions of having a bunch of neighbors to the back of me and some busy subdivision. This is my dream home. And so, in essence, we're sort of, you know.
But if he doesn't build the $750,000 house,
He can, I would.
if he builds something that he thinks is beautiful but makes the rest of the neighborhood look terrible.
I'm not sure that somebody would go out and spend that kind of money. In other words, to try to manage his I've heard about the plans of the house that he's anticipating putting in there. I just, and where it's going to be located, what criteria would he need to go through? He's not going to put a barn up. He's going to put a nice $700,000 house up with a swimming pool and the whole 9 yards. Probably one of the nicest houses in the area. And so then the question is, at what point would we need to have a judgment over how his house looks, other than he has to meet the city standards as far as putting in a nice house in. He's not going to build a little house. Beyond that, you know, I'm not sure what plan that anybody would turn down specifically. Can you picture a situation where somebody would put an unacceptable house in with, and not according to city standards? I mean, he has to still have building permits and meet all that criteria as far as sightliness of his house. If somebody buys a lot in the subdivision there and builds a house that somebody doesn't like the look of it, I just can't feature that as being a factor.
Well, I think probably what the point that you might be missing is that at least 3 and possibly 4 of the neighbors that already exist there are concerned that they don't have enough information to really support your project.
Sure.
They want more information. And if we could get those 4 people to come and say, this is a great deal, we know what's going on, it's not gonna affect us, you know, this is good for us, it's good for the neighborhood, we wouldn't even be talking here. But some of the things that's been brought up is we don't really know what we don't know, and we're not willing to stand up and say, this is good, I think you should do it. And that's the concern that the board has, because that's one of the 5 questions, and all you need is a no on that.
I would think that.
And you lose everything.
He could supply the plan. I think that the easement would probably be up in the air because.
Well, and that's okay, you know, that was just one of the things, but, you know, yeah, where's he gonna put it, what's he gonna be doing?
Supply some type of plan that he anticipates, a drawing of the house, is that what you're looking for? Or?
No.
Well, you get together with your neighbors and resolve their concerns.
Sure.
That's what we're asking if you would be willing to do.
Well, yes, I think that would be reasonable. Submit a plan before this body for, I'm not sure how we would go about all this of bringing the neighbors into looking at his plan to see if they like it or not.
Well, all we've done in the past is notification that there's gonna be a public hearing. They either attend or they send a letter that says, I have no opposition, or I really am concerned about what's going on, and then they show up. So it doesn't have to come before this board. The comments of the neighbors that have been issued would be appreciated.
Sure.
And then we could
submit a plan
finalize a decision on this, if that's what you were
for them to view.
interested in.
Well, the
We'll
city
work with
doesn't
Ms. Hurley.
send re-notification if, at a public hearing.
Right.
The item is continued to a later date. We don't send out re-notification.
No, but the
So-
ones that have come and have spoken
So that would be,
would be
for
already
the property
known.
owner to contact
On their own.
neighbors on their own. And then when they were ready to come back, to let staff know.
Yeah, or even right after this meeting.
Or
Meet with them for a few minutes and say, hey,
could I
we
suggest
can get
this,
together.
that he would be willing, I'm sure that he'd be willing to build a house consistent with the homeowners association's standards. Would that be acceptable?
I don't think that's, Mr. Wiley, I don't think that's the question. They have concerns. I don't think they're overly concerned about the size of the house, the cost of the house, the appearance, or anything else. They have concerns outside of just the house. So you, as the property owner, should get with the neighbors and find out, maybe also with the future buyer, and come to an agreement as to alleviate their concerns, take care of their concerns, so that they can come back to the city or here and say, it's all taken care of. We're happy with the sale of this property in this configuration, so that we can give you a variance so that someone can buy that property and build whatever house he wants to do with it. So that's what we're saying. We can table this until the next meeting, next month. And if you and the buyer satisfy their concerns, then we can get it approved. But right now, there's just not enough information that will take care of what will answer the questions that we have to answer in the affirmative. Everybody's saying yay or yes, so that we can grant you this variance.
Well, I will try to reach the neighbors and find out if they could, maybe list in writing, so I would have something to go on, because I know every one of these neighbors. Okay. And
That's the best way. Work with the buyer. What we really, should I get up again? I don't have to.
Julie, do you want?
Julie, you want
We
to-
won't be able to we won't be able to capture your comments for the minutes if you're not at the podium.
This is what I think we need. We need a plat of where the house is gonna be at. We need a plat of where the driveway is gonna be at, and then we submit that. That's really kind of what, so everybody knows what we got going on.
That's a start. That's a good start.
So,
Yeah.
and so, and I, you know, the owner, I met with him once, and so it's kind of like, okay. But, and I've drew the plan you got with the little house on there, that's about the size of the house. It's like 70 by 50, you know? And so that's approximately, but it's not exactly where the house is gonna be at. And when I produce plans, when I draw and submit plans to the city to build a house, it's platted. It's platted where the house is at and everything.
Yeah.
That's where I think my brother should go. I think it should have a plat of it, neighbors will be happy, know what's going on.
Okay. So all we need now is either a concurrence to table or for us to go ahead and go through.
Or if you'd like to go ahead and vote. Or you can make a motion to continue it to the next meeting, which would be May 21st.
I'd like to move that we continue the matter to May 21st.
Or to the next regularly scheduled meeting,
Yes.
something like that. And then you can determine what date that is.
Yeah, it's May 21st. We checked. the
Oh, okay,
calendar.
all right. So, all right, we have a motion to table.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, the motion will be tabled, and then hopefully all of the concerns will be addressed, and then we can move forward with this. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other business?
Nope.
I move we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moving second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Firing fast there.